MMD, or mirror movement development, is the missing pillar of longevity alongside nutrition and exercise. Today's episode number 284 will be speaking with Jim Houliston, a Philadelphia-based dual dominant artist, athlete, educator, and author of the world's first biscriptal book, Big 3 MMD, History's Ambidextrous and the Benefits of Mirror Movement Development. Welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning Podcast, where we cover the science-based evidence behind social and emotional learning for schools and emotional intelligence training in the workplace with tools, ideas, and strategies we can all use for immediate results. I'm Andrea Samadi, an author and an educator with a passion for learning, specifically on the topics of health, well-being, and productivity. When our guest today, Jim Houliston, first reached out to me, he let me know about the neurological, longevity, body realignment, spatial awareness, balance, and peak performance benefits that come from practicing mirror movement development, or MMD. And I stopped and wondered, what is MMD? And I was intrigued to learn more. I don't know anything about this topic, but after years of working out, mostly hiking and trail running, I've got certain aches and pains that never go away. I also want to keep the high level of balance that I have now for the next 20 years so I can keep doing the activities that I love as I'm getting older. So I wonder, how does what Jim has discovered improve body realignment, spatial awareness, balance, and peak performance? How could I implement this idea? How soon would I notice a benefit? And how exactly did he discover this idea? Let's meet Jim Houliston and learn about MMD and how this idea that he's discovered could possibly take our productivity to new heights. Welcome, Jim. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And this is a first for me because I know absolutely nothing about what you're going to share with us today. So I hope that as we go through the questions, you can help me tie in what we're working on right now, going back to the basics or the foundational skills to accelerate our results with what you're talking about. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. And you'd be surprised, Andrea, because most people do know something about MMD completely unknowingly. Like, you're a big hiker, hiking's MMD. And I'll get into how that is and why that is and how to best perform MMD while engaging in it.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm just going to get right into it. For our listeners
Boom.
right now, many people like me could be hearing about MMD, or mirror movement development, for the first time. So what is it?
So even before the layman's explanation, if I was to record you doing whatever you do throughout your day, I then take that video and then I would horizontally mirror flip it. The goal of MMD is to work to learn how to do what you see in that mirror flipped video. In that video, you'll see yourself reading in mirror direction, writing in mirror direction with your other hand, throwing with your other arm, kicking with your other foot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You'd see yourself in the kitchen with a mirrored can opener,
Oh, wow.
open it, mirror it. So it's all of that.
Okay. And so what's the science behind this, and how did you discover it to be writing books and talking about it?
Myself, like the large spectrum of inadvertent practitioners, it's often inadvertent to begin with. Many of us, we begin it for physical rehabilitation purposes. Like myself, Thomas Jefferson, he was one of those people. It's believed that Leonardo da Vinci was one as well. In one of his personal notebook pages, da Vinci talks about thanking God for having escaped from the murderers with just one dislocated hand. Same thing happened with Thomas Jefferson when he was over in France. For me, it was skateboarding. But the layman science of it, whenever you do something with, in this case right now, I'm twinkling my fingers here on my left hand, my right brain hemisphere is what is engaged in doing that. There's blood flow going to that brain hemisphere and vice versa. And that blood flow is oxygen. That oxygen creates new neurons and new synapses. It thickens your corpus callosum, affects the region of the hippocampi, which is largely associated with memory. And then the averse is the same as well, where when I move my right hand like this, my left brain hemisphere is doing that. So by engaging and practicing an MMD, which is, I refer to MMD as alongside nutrition and exercise, it is the third pillar of longevity. Some of the most incredible athletes on planet Earth who have also played the longest were also the most ambidextrous. And ambidexterity is the traditional understanding of this, but the word ambidexterity, which I use throughout my book, History is Ambidextrous and the Benefits of Mirror Movement Development, Big 3 MMD, I still use it because that's what's culturally best understood. But the word ambidexterity literally is like calling Native Americans Indians after you learn they're not actually from India. Ambidextrous literally means right-handed on both sides. The human body is not mechanically designed with two right hands. You're designed with a mirrored portion of left and right hands. And Benjamin Franklin wrote creatively 11 years before he died about how we should be teaching kids how to develop this. Houdini thought the same, so did Hippocrates. So again, there's a lot I can say on all of this. I imagine that I've answered your initial question, and I know we've got more. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's, even before we go into it a little bit more, think about why people don't practice this, why it feels so weird. And I was just sharing with you, I worked in the motivational speaking industry for a time period with a speaker named Bob Proctor. And he would open every session by saying, all right, everyone, put your pen in your left hand and write your name. And
remarkable.
It was
That's
so
great.
hard. I was sitting there going, like, all my notebooks have my maiden name written all squiggly.
Which is weird to think, because Andrea, I'm guessing you have an average designed human body where, your hands can superimpose like this in a complete mirror, right down the middle, bilaterally speaking, your exterior features, they're more or less symmetrically placed, just like your skeleton, and your whole organic system is symmetrically weighted, even though your organs are asymmetrically go all over the place. That's one of the biggest indications that humans were mechanically designed for mirrored movement. Equally left and right. And you see it in all other basic bilateral species under the sun where it's a 50-50 split in dominance. Humans were the only ones who were 90-10. I have my thoughts and theories on that I think make the most sense, that I'm happy to share. But you ask, well, why is it so weird and why don't we do it? In order for you to go practice MMD, if you were to follow to its fullest extent, you need a mirror designed can opener. Your keyboard, there does not even exist a completely mirrored keyboard. So there's a part of the brain that has never been exercised by anyone in humanity, because you can't actually do an exact mirrored assortment of that typing in that direction. But even something as simple as try to go to a networking event and go to meet people and extend to them your left hand.
Right.
It would just be so weird. Plus, we're also the only species who happen to sit around square and circular tables in order to sit down and eat. We are the ones who read and write, which cultures have chosen to just go one lateral direction. So there's many reasons that historically it's been advantageous to declare a side. Hygiene is a major thing that still to this day, there's many cultures who distinguish between a cleansing hand and then a writing and social hand. So there's many human-centric reasons as to why it's advantageous, but it still is not according to the mechanical design of the human body. Human body is designed just like a car, physically. Symmetric frame, symmetric exterior features, and when you open up the hood of a car, the quote-unquote organs, the internal components, that are asymmetrically all over the place. But the best designed car is going to weigh the same down both sides, just like the human body. You would never buy a you would never buy a car that only makes right-handed turns. But we're settling for the same with the human body. And as a result, we're lacking more, frankly, synapses, neurons in the brain, like the spatial awareness that increases. There's all these benefits that we'll of course get into, but I hope within there it answers the question. Oh, weird is the word that you used.
Mm.
And that is the word that 95+% of all the people who I engage in this say. It feels weird. Your brain is physically working to make brand new pathways that you've never exercised before. So it would be like going into the gym and trying to like lift a big weight and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. But if you start small, you repeat, I don't have to explain how going to the gym works, and then you get big and you come to
Right.
a point where you can ultimately lift whatever. The same thing is with this, like with MMD, you can see an exact progression for anyone who start with who starts writing. Always date your journal entries, so then you can see exactly how it improves over time. Um, yeah, it's a big exercise that has incredible benefits.
So how would someone start practicing it? And I know a little bit about your background from skateboarding. So, I'm just trying to think about, yeah, I can see him in the background there. And did you know Dr. Huberman was also a skateboarder?
Yep, I first listened to him on I think an episode of the Nine Club, which is it's a group of skateboarding YouTubes. They're pro skateboarders who they had him on, and it was all neuro nerdy based, and I was loving it. But he
Yeah.
was talking about how he would like skate at Embarcadero with Mike Carroll, and you reminded me that he was taking another wing with Frank Hawk, Tony Hawk's dad.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I've been skateboarding for nearly 30 years.
That's so cool. He's so much more interesting when he's talking about his skateboarding stuff because
All of us skaters are, at least for us who have been skating for so long. Yeah. I think he's only maybe a couple of years older than me, but yeah, it's funny. I presented at McGill University in October, and he was presenting the week after me.
oh,
And I
cool.
was like, "Are you serious? I'm missing meeting." I told Dr. Rolando Domeister, I'm like, "Yo,
Oh,
I totally want to go meet him." So,
that's awesome.
yeah. Mhm.
Cool. Well, so like going back to your athlete days, right? So
Which are
what
still happening. They're actually bigger than ever.
exactly? We never stop, but I don't know about you. You seem to be if you're close in age to Dr. Huberman, you're a little
The
younger than me. But like your body starts breaking down as you're getting older, and then you go to the
some
chiropractor and tell me about how you discovered MMD to rehabilitate your body.
Okay. So I've been skateboarding since the age of 12. I just turned 40 a month ago. Happy birthday to me a month later. And I every day I basically did it in Old Forge, Pennsylvania, and I would just skate to school or before after school. In college at Westchester University, I started a skateboarding club. So I was all the time skateboarding, and I only ever did it regular stance, which in the skateboarding world is when your left foot is forward on the board, and so you're pushing with that right foot. By the time I was 22, I was going to chiropractors to try to fix my lower back pain. I had to stop skateboarding. Whenever I would skateboard, my back would hurt. And it was shortly after this was all starting that I moved from Westchester, Pennsylvania to San Diego, California, with every aspiration to be skateboarding. And I physically couldn't do it and drove me insane to be in Southern California finally, not be able to actually skate. So within a year and a half of that depressing as hell episode, as you can imagine, I grabbed my roommate's skateboard. And we had a parking lot across the street. And so I just thought, let me go try a skateboarding switch because it was the only thing I didn't try. I went to the parking lot. I put my right foot on the board this time and started pushing with my left foot. And I felt like I couldn't do it. It was just so
Weird.
impossibly hard.
Yeah.
But I found it didn't hurt my body. So I went back the next day, then the next day, then the next day. 4 years of addicted, exclusively switch stance skateboarding, my body felt realigned. It was
Wow.
feeling great. I was doing tricks and all this. And then I thought, let me try skating regular again just to see how I can do it. And I was so nervous because I don't want to mess my body up. This was in North Park in San Diego on 30th Street. And I was in a parking lot. And so I tried to skate regular stance and I found I was immediately able to do new tricks. that I could never do before
Interesting.
after a dormant 4 years of not practicing it. And I later learned that that's something called manual transfer learning, where your dominant side actually gains proficiency when you focus exclusively on your last dominant side. And in that moment, what? I thought this is incredible. What would happen if I started doing everything else switch, AKA mirrored? So that night I went home and the light switch was with my left hand. And it just started like that. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to try eating with the fork in my right hand. And just little bit by little bit. I mean, there's thousands of things that you do every day that are sided. So you have an endless opportunity to practice MMD. And it's cool because you don't have to like go to a gym. You don't, you can practice it by yourself in and develop major proficiency with it, which my YouTube channel, I have videos showing like handrail walking, which I didn't even start doing until I was 35. And no one taught it to me. I didn't even really see anybody doing it. I've seen Ido Portal. He trains his students in rail walking. Um, Although I've never seen him like walk down 36 stair handrails and stuff like that. There's so much that you can do. Once your body feels great and realigned, it's like, and being 40, I know there's so many people who want to feel this way. And
Right.
some people will tell me, well, Jim, this sounds like a hard sale because you're telling me the average adult who wants to gain like real proficiency in this, it's going to take them 10 years of practice before they do it. Look, I didn't design the human body, but it's just, it works that way as an average adult. But if you're a little kid, you can learn it so much quicker. But yeah, I mean, you're dealing with the brain. The brain is an insane organ, 3 pounds in weight, 1.5% of the human body's mass, but burns 20% of all the body's energy. The thing has to rest. So when you say it felt weird, that's that 3 pound organ going like, yo, this is an insane workout right now. We need to take a break.
I was thinking about it like when you break your arm and you're in a cast, you've got to do everything with the other hand. You're forced to. So
Mhm.
it's a little bit different, like right now, was that your left hand that you drank your water with?
Oh, yeah.
Like, because I would naturally want to go pick up my water always with my right.
This is a left-handed keyboard, quote unquote. Even though it's far from what I actually want, it's the best that we've got. But yeah, I mean, my mouse is on my left side, which I work part-time at the Benjamin Franklin Museum here in Philadelphia. I have 5 close coworkers, 4 of which are all lefties. And they get pissed when they come up to the computer and I put the mouse on the left side.
So I kind of get how we can do this now. It's just, figuring out how to use different muscles, body parts,
Mhm.
um, and just start practicing. And you're saying when you do this, it strengthens the corpus callosum of the brain. Like what's
Yes.
happening?
So the corpus callosum, it's the communication bridge between the two hemispheres. And because you're doing so much more contralateral activity with practicing MMD, you're getting more symmetric blood flow to both brain hemispheres. So it's thickening that communication bridge between them both. Something that I understand has been understood by brain specialists for centuries is that people who have worked to learn and practice ambidexterity, their memory is better because I understand that there's an understanding in neuroscience that says memories are encoded in one hemisphere but decoded in another. And so, if your bilateral sides are more engaged equally, they can more quickly communicate to one another as the science that I understand, and that's why I wrote about it in the book. And I've listed various resources throughout the book and a lot of stuff. Um, but there's so much more that can be studied on all of this. A traditional science book that's going to be having so many people at so many universities, all kind of in the same boat, studying the same thing. You're going to get a lot of, you know, sometimes more of an immediate, compelling edition of a book. But I just know it'd be criminal for this story to not be shared. I know there's enough people who are like, yo, I want to feel good enough to do that kind of stuff. Sign me up, whatever that is.
Now, who did you notice? Like what famous people along the way did you notice found the benefits of this? Because you list them.
Leonardo da Vinci appears to be the most, and there's a lot more that can be understood. on why. I'm reading right now through Walter Isaacson's biography of Da Vinci and learning quite a few new things that I've not known that aren't written in my book. Particularly that Da Vinci himself was inspired by a couple of polymaths, Verrocchio being one of them. So he was a big influence by him. Raphael, Michelangelo, they are considered ambidextrous. It's understood that Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel dual dominantly, so using both hands, which I mean, it's such a massive piece. You kind of have to. Um, and even Dante 200 years earlier. So there seemed to have been something in the Italian Renaissance era that was happening because the earliest example of dual dominant handwriting that we have from Da Vinci was his Tuscan landscape drawing from 21 years old. But something that Walter Isaacson talks about is there was some contemporary of Da Vinci who wrote a book about handwriting, and he talked about the concept of mirror writing for people who are dominant lefty. So there was something of Italian Renaissance that was influencing that. But Benjamin Franklin's example, he's my favorite because I'm a tour guide in Philadelphia as well. I've been in Philly for almost 2 years, and I'm already, frankly, to my own horn, but an expert level tour guide of everything related to Philadelphia now, including a Benjamin Franklin expert because I researched him so heavily for this book. And he was a mirror reader for 30 years. And then 11 years before he died, he wrote an essay called A Petition of the Left Hand that he addressed to educators. The same year that the school he started 30 years earlier became recognized as the first university in America, the University of Pennsylvania. And he tells educators in a very creative fashion how both hands are designed for equal use and we should be teaching kids how to develop them as such. And that actually went on to influence Thomas Jefferson to practice ambidexterity for 40 years, the rest of his life, after having had that accident. He had an accident in France where he jumped over a fence trying to impress a chick he was really into named Maria Causeway, and he broke his right hand. But when they reunite in Philadelphia months before Franklin died, because this happened while Jefferson was in France and Franklin was already back here in Pennsylvania, they would have reconnected, and Franklin or Jefferson would have told Franklin, I broke my right hand while I was over in France, and so I had to start learning to write left-handed for rehabilitation purposes. And Franklin would have told him, dude, no way, you got to keep practicing that. I wrote an essay about this 11 years ago. Because the National Park Service website talks about Jefferson, our third U.S. president, practicing this for 40 years. So, yeah, as a big history buff too, I love it as well. But Benjamin Franklin, he did so much. I guess so many tourists would tell me, wow, he was really smart. He only went to elementary school for 2 years before the age of 12.
Wow.
There's so much I can say on him, but his brain was abnormally symmetric because he would read at work in mirror direction as a colonial printing composer because all those individual mirror cast, all those individual ink metal letters, they're all mirror cast. So he's reading in mirror direction from the age of 12 to 42. And then after work, he's going home at night and he's reading books in the traditional direction. So during the day, his eyes are going from right to left. And then at night, going the other way. And I do mention Dr. Andrew Uberman within Big 3 MMD, I think at this portion, because he talks about how the eyeballs are the only exterior part of the brain, that they're not connected to the brain, but they're actually part of the brain. Like they actually are brain that's on the outside of your face.
As you're talking, I'm thinking back to this friend of mine. He was a presidential historian. His name was Doug Weed. And he's been gone a couple of years now, but he would talk about the U.S. presidents like no one else. And it would have been amazing to have him on this and have him give some history to add to what you're saying, because he would do it. He would go back and I would watch him on CNN and connecting all the presidents in the past from Reagan all the way through. And he'd been, in the White House with many of them. He did interviews with the president's children and written a lot of books. So it was just
wow.
Listening to you. I miss him a lot, and I wish he was here because he would have added to this conversation like no one else. It would have been phenomenal because I don't know your craft. And I'm Canadian, so I'm definitely not going to talk about the US presidents. That's why I would watch
Sure.
Doug Weed talk, but gosh, it would have been phenomenal to have him here right now. So when I heard your, looking at all these people's dominant hands, I thought, how did he come up with this? Almost like how Doug Weed came up with his theory. And so I just wonder.
Well, I mean, I've had quite a bit of time to think about this stuff, and what really happened, the reason that my book is even existing is because by the time I would say 34, I started really noticing some differences. The spatial awareness stuff, the
Right.
balance.
Yeah.
When I was living in Tijuana, Mexico, that's when I started rail walking because I did slacklining for many years, mostly in Tijuana, and I lived for a bit in Guadalajara, Mexico. And but when I moved to Tijuana, there's no real parks that have a bunch of trees that you can post a slack line up on, but there's a lot of rails and like low to the ground round rails. And I just thought like I would hold on to a thing on the side like a wall so I can balance safely. But I was like, this feels kind of like a slack line. But then because I grew up skateboarding for so many years, the idea of being on top of a handrail wasn't like the most foreign concept. So I just kind of like pieced them together and was having it's so much fun, Andrea, in general MMD. Because with handrail walking, there's handrails everywhere. I can go to a new city and find like New York City has some of the craziest 50 stair handrails on the Hudson. And at 40 years old, I can be excited about going up there, longboarding around all day, and then going handrail walking. And I haven't been to a chiropractor in years. Which, by the way, chiropractors they incorporate MMD and adjustments. I've never had a chiropractic adjustment that was just on one side and not the other. They're mirroring their movements. Same thing with yoga. Same thing with swimming, cycling, running, walking, all of that. Hiking. There's a way. What you would want to do, Andrea, with hiking to really utilize MMD, you want to practice symmetric breaths, which is basically exhaling on your odd-ended steps. And then with swimming, it's strokes, with biking, it's pedals. But so on your third, your fifth, your seventh, or your ninth are going to be the most relaxed. Your third, your threes are going to be the most accelerated. And I talk a bit about this in at least one of my YouTube videos. When you do this, and then even incorporating reversal walking, and of course, you want to be safe with this, but it's kind of a cousin of MMD doing reversals. According to, again, my opinion, it's kind of like going reverse in a car. You can go reverse in a car, but you certainly can't perform to that level that's made to go going forward. Same thing with backwards walking, and same thing with the duration of it. But like for your anterior posterior posture, reverse walking is great. Same thing with front packing. If you've carried a backpack on your back for most of your life, put it on the front.
Wow. Oh,
Game changing for your
wow.
spine.
That's
I tell people in my meetup group here in Philly, MMD Philly, and they'll practice it when we go do hikes and walks. And various of them have come up to me and be like, "Yo, I definitely feel a great difference in my back."
wow. Because I have neck pain that I always have. And when I get to a certain part of the trail, I take it off, my backpack off, and just put it over one shoulder because it's like, no, I'm free. I never
And
thought.
if you do that, go back and forth, but put it on the front.
Yeah, I never thought about that ever.
And you want to be mindful of your breaths when you're doing it. You want to make sure you're getting like good, regular, deep breaths because your back is going to be on your stomach. So of course, like not a crazy heavy pack. I think you would really want to do it with, but be
Right.
mindful of those breaths and just not on there the whole time because you have your organs and stuff there. But like in general, especially if you have a good soft backpack, money, you're gonna feel great.
Interesting. Okay. So what criticism have you received about this? I'm curious about that always because when you put yourself out into
Mhm.
the world, not
Yeah.
everyone loves your ideas. So what
No, very true, very true, very true. You know what? And so listening to your podcast, I'm going to hypothesize it's a lot of folks who have their major degrees and are doctors and such. Um, One of my favorite Benjamin Franklin quotes that I was even thinking, am I going to say it on our podcast? But at this point, I got to say it. He says, an educated blockhead is a greater blockhead than an ignorant one. And
Yeah.
this idea that, because I've talked to people and talking about like the idea of Broca's area, and they're like, well, Broca's area is in the left hemisphere, therefore it doesn't be like, well, and I mentioned in my book this idea that I'm actually duplicating my quote unquote Broca's area. Because the idea is MMD, the body is made for mirrored movement. Reading and writing is a form of body movement. So it's made for that. And so if I'm physically able to do it with my left hand, my right brain hemisphere is doing it. And if my Broca's area is in the other one. And so there's a lot that comes up that's kind of like, even Broca's area, I know it's not an even 90-10 split with handedness. I think it's more like between 70 and 80 in the left hemisphere, give or take. But I understand that there's a lot of lefties who are kept out of scientific studies on handedness because their brains are quote unquote too different or the results become too weird. Um, so there's just so when I come up against that kind of stuff, like I even met, this will sound like a delightful tale. I met this girl at a bar last week, my favorite bar in Philly, called Tattooed Mom on South Street, because every inch of the walls upstairs are covered in street art. So all of us street artists, of which I am, I'm a ambidextrous chalk artist around the city. I'll go and I'll do art pieces up there and enjoy $6 beers. But there was a comedy show happening that night, and this girl comes out. We start chatting, and she's watching me do my art, and mentioning it being dual dominant and such. She mentions, "Oh, I study neuroscience." I'm like, cool, awesome. And so, so she's like, so what is this? I'm like, well, the layman science of MMD, when this hand does this, this brain hemisphere goes off, the opposite is reversed. And she told me not necessarily. And I was like, I'm flabbergasted. I've never heard someone study neuroscience to say, well, no, it's not cross the contra hemispherical, the brain body relationship to movement. And I was like, where have you heard that? I definitely want to like know your resources. And she just couldn't say anything. It was just kind of like not necessarily. So little things that come up every now and then. But I've got a good buddy of mine who's also a tour guide, had been a neuroscience professor out in California for many years. My buddy Matt Bautista. And I've even asked him straight up, I'm like, you're the academic guy, you know all about me telling you this. He's got my book. And I'm like, do you think this sounds crazy? He's like, nope, this makes perfect sense. Dr. Catherine Coe is an ambidextrous neurosurgeon and fine artist out of Manhattan. She swears by this. She believes that her practice of MMD over the last 30 years with writing in the traditional direction with her less dominant hand helped her become a fine artist after being a neurosurgeon. So there's just so many different examples that come up, but I will say, Andrea, it feels a bit deflating right now because I'm spending a lot of time emailing all the neuroscience kinesiology people at the universities here in Philadelphia, and I'm getting crickets as far as responses. So I'm just kind of like, you know what? Take a breather here, Jim, and take your time. This is a slow burn thing. This is very new to a lot of people, even though this isn't a new thing. Because again,
What
we're talking about Da Vinci, we're talking about the ancient Greeks practiced it in the 12th century BC with Bostrophodon. Hippocrates told people that they should be practicing this. The ancient Scythians apparently had it legal that people were to practice this. So it's not a new thing.
so I'm
It's just very
curious.
new to a lot of people.
I'm curious when you're emailing, what are your goals with this? What are your dreams? Where do you see this going?
Great question. Great question. My initial emails to these folks, try to be hey, I'm a local author. I wrote this book. It's on neuroscience kinesiology. Here's a free download to the audiobook and the ebook. And I'm interested in teaching this, so I'm curious your thoughts as an educator. I'm going to be teaching a class this summer on all of this. So, ultimately to invite them in the future. But, whatever, at the very least, it's something new, but it feels deflating because this is something that I think is so profound. And all the people who practice it, who I mentioned in my book, they all say the same thing. It's the best choice we've ever made for our brains and for our bodies. Remarkable. Um,
It's almost
I
like
don't know.
people have to discover it on their own. Like, when someone tells you to go do something, like if my day's really busy, I'm going to grab my water with my right hand because I got to grab something else with the left. And
Sure.
So it's hard to do something unless you've broken your arm and you have to. And then you realize, oh, wow, look at the skills I learned. And then you pick up your book and you realize that this is actually a thing.
Sure. And up until this point, yeah, most people only got into it because of that, at least from the stories of people I know contemporarily speaking. Diego Irigoyen is a great example of a guy who was inspired by a practitioner of this, Michael J. Lavery, the author of Whole Brain Power. And Diego since wrote a book called Creative Brain Training because he got into this because he saw the results of Michael Lavery and he was really impressed. He's like, let me give this a try. And he actually devoted a lot of initial time to it to a point where he found himself being able to pay better attention in class. He said he went from like a C student to an A student. And he just swore by to the point where I think University of California, San Bernardino permitted him to teach a class on all of this for, I think, a year, called Whole Brain Power, but he introduced his students to mirror writing and all this. And I have an interview with him on my YouTube channel, and he says that for students who practice this, they're going to become better students. They're going to become better people in general, as salacious as that might sound. But literally, if you are experiencing the growth of new neurons and synapses in your brain, your hemispheres are better communicating with one another, your body's more aligned, you're paying more attention to your surroundings and growing that spatial awareness and all these different things. It's like, why there's people listening to this who eat healthy, work out, not because they necessarily love it, but because they know their body feels incredible when they make that consistent lifestyle choice. MMD is the same exact thing.
Well, that is so cool. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your book with me, opening my eyes. When I first came across your email, what it was that caught my attention was that you've discovered a way to improve body realignment. And, as we're all getting up there in age, we're thinking, well, how do we fix that other than going to the chiropractor? Spatial awareness, balance, and peak performance. So to kind of bring this to a close, you've summed it up really nicely. How could the average person take your book, go to your website, and read your book and apply this in a way that it will improve those areas?
Well, for one thing, you'll pick up my book, and again, it's the world's first, I'll say, modern biscriptal book, because the ancient Greeks with Bostraphodon, they would have written something similar to this. But you can physically practice mirror reading and get into it little bit by little bit. One thing that you'll notice when you make a consistent habit of mirror reading, when you go back to reading in the traditional direction, you're going to be way faster at it, which is really cool to experience. How to really get into it, just practicing MMD. One thing that I'll say, I should write and post on my website, this will be my next homework assignment for Planet Earth, basically like the top 50 things that you can do to begin MMD. And number one would be like, go home, left, opposite hand for the light switch. Step 2, eat your Cheerios with that other hand. Step 3, doorknobs, or doorknobs first and then, fork. And so, but little bit by little bit, maybe, step 10 is going to be like chopsticks or, whatever. There's a world of things that you can do, even like counting money. There's a mirror way of doing that. Tying your shoelaces, which other than left-handed mirror writing is the that would be like number 50. That would be like the most difficult. I think number 49 would be mirror tying your shoelaces, which might not sound complex, but try it. Hand, and then actually go around it with the other hand, and it will blow your mind apart. Just because of what you need to learn in order to accomplish it, and that learning in that activity is your spatial awareness growing.
So your final thoughts on this for people to go to your website, ambilife.org, get your book, try the ways that you say that we can experience ambidextrous.
Mm-hmm.
How do I say it?
Well, I would say dual dominance,
right.
but again, I mean, I'll say ambidextrous. Yeah, ambidexterity.
I knew
yeah.
You told me it was
right-handed on both sides.
So I'm like closing out with the wrong way.
Sure.
So,
and I'll tell if you are a professor, educator, and you're interested in actually seeing something like this demonstrated or taught at your school, please hit me up. That's my major thing. There's a lot of things that I want to do in order to see that this is taught everywhere. But just go to ambilife.org and connect with me.
Well, hats off to you for putting yourself out there with this. Another way to help everybody improve their productivity, resiliency, longevity, and results. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.